listening to yet another episode of Smash the Bug podcast. I am your host, Joseph Maxwell, and I am super excited about the guest that we are bringing on today. His name is Ray Bogman. He is a Magento Senior Business Solutions Architect at Adobe, and he's worth every single bit of his 5-word job title. And I'm looking forward to dissecting it, what he does at Adobe and learning from his really extensive experience working with Adobe Commerce, i.e. Magento. So before we jump in, make sure that you have subscribed on our YouTube channel, Swift Otter Inc. on YouTube, or on any one of our other podcast syndication platforms, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or Spotify. Look up Smash the Bug there, and you will find us. So without further ado, welcome, Ray. It's good to have you part of this conversation. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Joseph, for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be on this great show.
Well, likewise, it is a pleasure to have you on this show. So maybe a quick overview as far as what do you do at Adobe?
Well, that's a good one. I mean, first of all, I think like being a part of the Adobe brand, the community, how it's so far, but actually my day-to-day is supporting Magento Commerce clients. Currently, as we speak, I'm supporting one of the larger enterprises out there. One, I think it's pretty common and known brands out there, HP Inc.
Okay.
I guess you heard of that.
So yeah, I think most people have.
Yes, I'm working with them on transforming some of the current Magento sites they already have, like 16 in Asia and Latin America, and converting them into PWA Studio. So everything is going headless there. And the aim is to be the largest PWA studio across the globe. So, and the other one I'm pretty happy about is Alshaya. It's one of the largest retail brands in the Middle East, serving more than 60 channels across that particular region. Also on Magento Commerce, serving a little bit more on 100 servers on the Magento Cloud, and having a headless infrastructure using outweighs Drupal. So it's pretty hectic, I would say, but also energizing to work with these kind of clients and supporting all the positive and new things that we have from the Adobe stack.
That is really awesome. And you said 100 servers for...
Yeah, 100 plus.
100 plus. That's a significant amount of computing power right there to make sure that those sites stay online.
Well, to be frank, I mean, using Magento Cloud, for those who are familiar, it's a cluster environment. So some sites that we have are just production clusters, but also dedicated staging, QA. Everything is dedicated at Alshaya. And some of the larger brands like Bath, Body and Works, you're probably familiar with that.
Yes.
In the US, and H&M, they're also hosted in the Middle East. They have split architecture on Magento. So they have like 9 front ends and 3 databases on the back. And looking forward already to start migrating them over the next couple of months, going into the new platform. I'm not sure if you heard of it, the new Adobe Commerce Cloud, which will be Kubernetes. And that will be the newest stack that I'm proud to will start migrating those kind of brands on, using the latest and greatest on AWS.
That's great. Wow, that is awesome. Yeah, because I had heard about some of those new updates coming, and I'll be curious to see how that rollout goes. But that's a great new enhancement that's coming in there. And then I guess that kind of ties into my next question here for you. What are some of your favorite developments in this Adobe Commerce / Magento ecosystem that you are most excited about?
Well, one of the things from a personal note, but I think also from a business practice, is that the overall gain that clients like I support look at TCO, total cost of ownership. Looking at the future roadmap from a product perspective, we see that optimizing not only the code, but also how to upgrade. Because, if you have all those patches and upgrades up and running going into a next release, it's a lot of effort. And as you can imagine, brands like HP and Alshaya, but also others, even smaller ones, you want to make sure that those are sufficient. So that's on the roadmap. but also, of course, the microservice components that Adobe is currently working on. I'm really keen on start using those kind of components since it definitely will benefit the performance and also the agility on servicing those brands.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about microservices just for a moment there, because I know there's been a lot of conversation in the community recently about microservices and kind of how that all fits together in the grand scheme of things. Obviously, we're coming at Adobe Commerce as of this point is, I don't know if we could throw a number out, like probably 90% a monolith. I mean, because now we have the product recommendations, we have live search. I think I'm missing one. I'm missing. I think
recommendations.
I don't remember if I said that. Yeah, but exactly right. Product recommendations.
Yeah, live search and product. Yeah, they're both supported by Sensei.
Yeah, so we're starting down that road.
Yeah.
But I think one of the big questions is the customization of this, right? Because people, that's kind of one of the big selling points of Adobe Commerce is how do you cut? I mean, well, you can customize anything and everything with you got the code in front of you, and you pretty much can figure out a way. So how can you speak quickly to some of that potential concern that at least some developers in the community might have about how customizable is this, or the value that they're getting with microservices that could potentially outweigh the concerns of lack of customization? Does that make sense?
Well, it does make sense. And to be honest, I mean, I would say have a look at Firefly or Adobe I/O. And I think for those out there listening to this podcast, check into the Adobe Live channel. If not mistaken, the 4th and the 5th, there's a developer conference online being supported, being shared definitely much more on that. I've just seen it. I haven't played with it, to be frank. But looking at the overall architecture that we start working with and how it would look like from a developer perspective, using these kind of microservices, let's say on a catalog perspective, and the flexibility, not only from a re-index perspective, there's so much to gain on performance level instead of just having the monolith doing all the work.
Right.
If you think about the price update, now the monolith needs to do all the work.
That's right.
If those components will live in that microservices and it's ready to go and to be fetched and served to whatever channel out there, if it's mobile or headless or whatever you'll feel like, that data is ready to go instead of, organizing it with Magento. So I'm really thrilled about those kind of functionality because it's been hitting for the last 10 years. I mean, I've been now within the Magento community as of 2018, pretty early on. I've seen several things, and I would say back in the day, it would be great already having these kind of functionalities, but now it is. So we should be either thinking about the architecture. If it makes sense, please use them. If it doesn't make sense, don't use them.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well that's fair, and I totally understand the logic in that. And frankly speaking, I think Adobe Commerce, if it has erred, it has erred on the side of too much customization as opposed to, or the too much capability to customize, as opposed to reach. And I've had a conversation with somebody recently about that, as opposed to reaching to standard community components, in using those. So I think it's a very delicate balancing act for sure, but it's nice to see, maybe a little bit less capability for customization so that more benefits of convention can be brought back.
And that relates back to the TCO discussion. We've seen too many customers having, to be frank, lots of discussions on TCO. Why is it that expensive? We want to be more agile and from a cost perspective. So having these services in place out of the box within the near future will help. And true, I mean, there's still room to optimize or customize what you feel like.
Yes.
But, I mean, I always have one personal goal in mind. I know it's hard to match that in real life, but if 80% comes out of the box, 20% is custom, it will help you to be adapt quickly to the market and create new things, but also be flexible to upgrade. It's a balancing act.
That's good. Absolutely, because it is. And the problem is, merchants across the world, their requirements differ so vastly. It's probably difficult to capture, even 50% of what every merchant needs, and then the other 50% probably at least is wildly varying requirements.
Yeah, and true, but also being up to date. I mean, even yesterday I had a really incredible call with a large coffee manufacturer in Europe, pretty known, and they were not even aware of some of the features that we are supporting on Magento Cloud, like private link, offloading some of the data that developers can do and serving that back to their data center instead of using an expensive cron that will lead into too much CPU or memory. So many things are there, and I would recommend all those people watching this show, listening it, be up to speed on what's created on the dev docs. Read the release notes and make as much value on the tools been given by Adobe Magento, helping you to succeed your goals.
That's right. Well, even like SWOT, site-wide analysis tool, and I mean that is a really cool, powerful tool, and if it's not being used, of course, you don't get the value for it, and you're paying for it. So why not start using it and getting value from it?
Yeah, it should be a priority. I mean, in the overall game, from also debugging, stability, performance, security, be aware of the tools which are supported. Have them up and running, visualize. I wouldn't say maybe every day, would be really nice, of course, but have them at least being audited every week. What's the current quality state of the environment? Because that will lead in less overhead and will have at the end more conversion, which I think for our merchants out there, that's the aim. It's not about the code that we write or the develop. Sometimes it's great and we can be proud of it, but at the end, it's the end goal, having that user experience converting online, because at the end, that will pay the dollar that we're looking for.
Absolutely. Totally. 100% agree there. Let's jump into a slightly different mode of question here. And you are a solutions architect. You talked about how you've interacted with some really big brands. You've had a lot of conversations, even if you're not like intimately in the details. I'm guessing it's safe to say you've dealt with some of the inner workings on perhaps hundreds of websites, if not thousands. So what would be some of the biggest, most costly mistakes, even like either from a TCO perspective or from a conversion rate perspective, that you see happening on Magento/Adobe Commerce websites? Like, what would be perhaps the top three, and then we can dive into those.
Yeah. Well, an interesting one, and I think it's a really good question. And to be frank, even yesterday, a question like that popped up. And it's all about the architecture. I mean, there was a client having requirements, and reading the requirements, I think that's the most easiest, but understanding the requirements, that's something different. And I will give an example. This client, and I don't have the specs on it because I was referred by one of my colleagues who wanted to have 500 of something. It's like 500 websites, 500 store views. What are we aiming at? At the end, I wanted to have 500 websites. Well, to be frank, it's not a best practice. I mean, true, you can create it, but doing the calculations and the database, attributes and all those kind of things that nobody thinks about. And I've seen a website that I didn't build myself, but done performance testing on, was 800, and that was even on Magento 1.13. So that's been a while.
That's right.
So architectural requirements and understanding those requirements, I think that's one of the biggest pitfalls. People start listening, reading, and let's say, well, we can do that. And over time, we gain more knowledge on what's realistic. So from a knowledge perspective, the best we can share as quickly as possible and update the client on what's realistic instead of nodding and selling them something. So sometimes I'm kind of cautious on not oversell. Please, I mean, Magento can do a lot, but don't oversell. And sometimes we are just eager to just get that deal because, it's good for business. But at the end, it's pretty poor developed, pretty, poor architecture. And well, one thing's for sure, the client's not happy and the merchant's not happy. So nobody's happy,
That's right.
So what's the deal on that?
Well, but they got the sale in the first place, and we've dealt with a number of those situations, and it's just it gives Magento a bad name. It gives the agents, the solution partner, a bad name. The merchant's not. I mean, nobody's happy at that point, and it's Yeah, and it can be a bit of a disaster.
No, I mean, we have too many Magento 1 sites back in the day where everything was possible and so many sites went rogue. It's like, I would say sometimes Magento felt like Lego, with all respect. You can do and play whatever you feel like.
Right.
But a wrong architecture, wrong foundation killed the whole stack. And that's not good. That's definitely not good.
That's right. And you mentioned websites, stores, and store views, I assume in a scoping context, right? So like
Correct.
Whether to use websites. And I think I've seen that less with the merchants I've worked with, but more just in the field as I've done a lot of training with people. The default is just to, hey, let's just create a new website and store view for this. Like, why not? As opposed to thinking, wait, every website I create is another part of this exponential piece in, for example, the pricing indexer. And... Yeah. If you're saying, I can't remember exactly if you were saying like 500 new websites. I mean, that's just a bazillion of rows in that pricing indexer table, which is going to take, I mean, you can't parallelize that enough. Like that's going to take a lot
of
time. Exactly.
It's a nightmare. I mean, the cron, the thing is, having discussions like that, I already see clients at the end complaining about why is the cron not running, why does it take that long, why this or why that. Well, it starts with the architecture. It's the same as building a house. I sometimes have shared while giving trainings, like, if the foundation is not correct, at the end it looks like a house, but if there's a wind or heavy rain coming and it cracks, then you will define if the foundation has been solid and you can live in it, or if it falls down and you need to rebuild. So
that's right. Absolutely. I totally agree. And I think the hard part is, how does one fix it, right? Because, I think there's two aspects. First, right now, it seems like solution partners are under the gun. They have, I say this from experience, there's not enough talent in this world to handle the demand. So you got to be trying to get things through as fast as possible. Merchants want things through as fast as possible. So that kind of introduces the possibility of cutting corners. But also, on the other hand, there's just a knowledge factor. Again, like somebody who's speccing this out says, well, just use 500 websites, versus really sitting down and understanding, okay, well, but a website should be used in this context, and maybe that's the only way we can use it. But really, could we use actually 500 store views, or could we use shared catalogs to do this, accomplish the same goal? So, I guess if we break it up, I think, into these two parts. One is just cutting corners. I don't know if there's much to talk about on that one, but the knowledge aspect, I think, is really critical in training people to understand how this works, right?
Well, to be frank, the more we share on that, and I would say from an Adobe perspective, ideally, having maybe even a splash page on that, on the dev docs. I'm not sure if it's there, but maybe I need to speak about somebody internally on that. But having those details available for, architects out there who are maybe not as, familiarized like yourselves and me in this, having that data ready and understanding it, and having somebody explaining why this is a bad case, that will help so many things, from day one.
That's right. Documentation. Yeah. That's well put.
Yeah.
Exactly. I totally agree. All right. So that was
sharing.
Yeah. I get that. That's good. So that was number one. And so basically, correct me if I'm wrong here, but the lack of knowledge when it comes to architecting the foundations of how a Magento instance is constructed. There's a lot of decisions that go into this from day one. And like you're saying, if those are not done right, well, we finally get to the end and ready to launch, and the project is a bit of a disaster. Performance speaking, or whatever, buggy or whatever else.
True. I think that's most crucial, to be aware of it. And again, that falls back to, of course, the knowledge piece, but being a solution architect and making sure that reading the requirements, but also adjusting them instead of just, taking them and creating whatever the client creates. I mean, fair enough, the client has requirements, and that's why it's called requirements, but some requirements can be adjusted,
Yes.
based on the most efficient way on how to structure this. So I would always say have a discussion, and based on what's realistic, go back and come up with a solution which is suitable, but still realistic for them, but also to build on that.
That's good. So being willing to also push back on those requirements instead of saying, okay, merchant wants this, I got to do this, even though I know it's a bad idea. Being willing to push back and say, hey, this is why it's not a good idea, and here's a better idea, better way to do this.
Yeah, better safe than sorry.
That's right. I totally get that. What about PWA? So you've certainly been gaining some very big knowledge of PWA over the past, I presume, year or two, since it's working to gain significant popularity. What would you say are some of the biggest mistakes or challenges that have arisen with implementing PWA that you can share and help educate us with?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I have I wouldn't say a daily call, but a weekly call with some of my colleagues, and on this particular topic, and proud to announce that Jordan Eisenberger, who's one of the lead PWA developers out there, who's a part of my team currently supporting HP.
Wow, that's great.
So it's really great working with him even on that, but having also a good understanding what he sees. I mean, he's so much knowledgeable on that topic than myself, but listening to him and looking at where we are, and the thing that I've seen the most now is that a lot of people just started. It feels like Magento 1 sometimes. We have codes and we start to learn code, and you've been there yourself as well, and
yes.
It's like learning, falling, and
that's right.
At one point you have, at some point, I think, good codes. And that's the thing that we see as well. We see developers creating codes, but with the knowledge like Jordan has, he already oversees, because he's a little bit more knowledge on really how to create that. So, and this is what I share as much as possible within my team, is making sure that what he sees shares around the rest of the developers, making sure that they are in a good place and they can learn from each other. So again, falling back, it's all about knowledge. and of course, we need to fall, because that's the same how we grew up. I would say, we were not able to walk from day one.
That's right.
That's the same discovery. So making mistakes, that's a good thing. But criticize yourself, get back on the horse, and continue and start learning and doing it better every day, every better day. And based on that, I would say from a PWA perspective, maybe 1 or 2 years from now, we will see more and more talented people like Jordan, who can even share that message across, where we will have better developers, hopefully in a year, maybe 2, maybe 3, who are at the same level that we have on Magento 2 right now. So I would say it still needs a little bit of time to get the adoption, because it's a total different, I would say, programming language. It's React, which is definitely of PHP developers. Some people like it, some people don't. But again, it's about sharing as much as we can.
That's great. Absolutely. I think that's good. Yeah, it is such a different paradigm, React. I guess it was somewhat similar to Knockout, but I am happy to see Knockout being phased out thanks to React coming in. So that's a very positive thing, in my opinion.
We've seen so many frameworks out there over the years. Let's face it. And then that's a good thing. That's all about code. And some code was better than others. And going back to the jQuery discussions that we had several years, and how happy everybody was that finally jQuery was the final framework, and now we have Next.js or Alpine, but with PWA we use React, and I think it's a really solid framework that we can be proud about, but always open to learn and see what kind of options we have. But up until now, let's support the best we can within the React framework from a front-end perspective.
Well, and to be frank, and to the Magento 2 core team's credit, I think while Knockout gets a lot of hate, and justifiably speaking, 8-9 years down the road, at the time, what was it, 2012, 2013, when that decision was made, if I remember correctly?
Yeah.
Knockout was literally the best framework. It was cutting edge. It was it was new concept. And I think, I feel like in the past 5 years, perhaps, somewhere in there, the JavaScript environment has achieved some level of maturity. And I think Knockout was still kind of JavaScript in puberty, if you will. Like it was still kind of figuring things out. But
it evolves.
Yeah, and now I think we see Vue and React, and I guess those are the two biggest players. Those have achieved that maturity that was eventually going to come, and I think those are the ones that have achieved that. And so,
well, true, but we should always be open. I mean, to be frank, I love what's going on with Vue or with React, but always keep a close eye on Next.js or on Gatsby, on what they are doing, because at the end, they're still frameworks.
That's right.
And they define the purpose that they need to work on from a development perspective. But I mean, from a business perspective now, React and looking how that fits with PWA Studio, but also with the flexibility on having that adopted within the Adobe Experience Manager.
That's right.
Using all that kind of components. So from an architectural perspective, going back, having too many of those frameworks fitted, that's going to be a mess. Let's be really open on that. And having a solid framework which will be supported, well, that's a good fit. I mean, and look, for instance, on the whole Zend discussion that we had a couple of years ago. I mean, this is how things happen. Over time, new frameworks will arise, and looking at that point in time, what the best benefit would be, that's, I would say, the pick that we need to choose.
That's right.
And the product team will lead that.
That's right. Absolutely. I totally agree. I totally 100% agree. Absolutely. That's good. Thank you. I think that wraps up our conversation. And I think it's some really good, solid material that people are going to benefit from listening to this. Thank you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
Very good. All right. Well, that was a pleasure to talk to Ray. He's such a knowledgeable person in the community. Again, working on hundreds or perhaps even thousands of Adobe Commerce websites. This guy's been through it. He's seen a lot of stuff. And I think the one big takeaway that we observe here is knowledge, getting in there, learning, challenging yourself, taking on maybe a little bit more than you can chew. And what is the best way to do this? Reading through the dev docs, like any source of knowledge you can get your hands on, do it. Because Adobe Commerce is changing, it's improving, and you could be left behind if you're not changing, improving with it as well. So make sure you are on the top of your game as an e-commerce developer. Thank you for listening to Smash the Bug, this additional episode. Make sure you are subscribed. We talked about that at the beginning. I will not bore you with those details again. It's been a pleasure to have you as a listener to Smash the Bug.